Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Physiology of Endurance Running podcast. I'm Dan, joined by Owain. Owain, how are you doing on this hot evening?
I'm not doing bad. Yeah, it's getting hot. But no, doing all right. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Double running, I see, from
I
Strava.
know. Yeah. Getting the volume up. That's all that matters. Volume.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk a bit more about that, the importance of volume later in this episode.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I've just finished recording with Alistair Brownlee. I should need no introduction, but two-time Olympic gold medalist in triathlon, so London 2012, Rio 2016. Um, just, phenomenal
I mean,
athlete, very smart guy, as we'll go into. But
just
yeah,
legend of
really,
the sport, right?
yeah, like he transcends triathlon, doesn't he, and sport in general. Like
Yeah.
everyone, I think no every Brit is going to know who Alistair Brownlee is, right? Unless you've been hiding under a rock. So very cool that he came on the podcast today. Very exciting to chat to him, and like really like smart guy, knows what he's talking about, not just at a superficial level. You can tell in I think it comes across that he wants to know the details of every tiny component that is going to make him the best triathlete he can be. Great to chat with him today.
Yeah. Yeah. And a really nice that he like it's his training was. I don't want to say simple because it like first of all hours of training, but and obviously complex and well reasoned and thought out. But he simplified it so much in terms of I don't want to ruin it, but how he trained is he didn't have any data that he didn't need, which is quite interesting for such a data driven sport, especially triathlon.
Yeah, but I think that's where the critical analysis comes in. Like, there's no point having data if you can't action on it. Like, I love data, and I like more numbers were better, but actually, it doesn't work like that. You need to choose your few variables, especially in this day and age when there's so much data. You choose a few variables that you have faith and confidence in and know what they mean, and
Yeah,
then you stick to that and just collect that robustly. I would much prefer to have like two or three key metrics, but I think are reliable and relate to performance rather than 15, which, you know, you don't actually know what they mean or how do you action it. Like that's a waste of time. And
yeah.
in triathlon, time is not a thing you've got loads of.
Yeah, I think it gets mentioned, but it's probably worth sort of having in your head, especially for runners listening to this. Like, you know, a 10-12 hour training week in running is pretty big, and it's more than most people are doing. But Alistair's was doing 30 hours a week, and if you've got 30 hours worth of data, that's a lot to process, and you don't have much time left once you're done training and eating and sleeping.
No,
So
no.
you have to get to cut through everything, and which yeah,
But what
he details.
one of the things I was thinking going through it was his thought process, his training philosophy was just echoing to me like James and the Surpoc episode we did. Like training loads, the biggest, most important thing, sustainable training, making sure that the intensity control is there. And like that was nice to hear in terms of like we've had a really good response to that episode. So thanks to everyone who listened to that. But actually, Alistair Brownlee is pretty much saying like the same key messages and just not getting distracted by the shiny bits. Like he talks about marginal gains and all that. And yeah, you need that to be Olympic champion, but never to lose focus of the big picture, which is doing a lot of training.
Yeah,
Um, so
yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
yeah. But no, there's loads of interesting. Well, I think the whole thing's interesting, but there's a lot of interesting things. As I don't know about you, I remember growing up and watching it's ITU, isn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like they're always on a Sunday night on BBC maybe they would show because the brownies are massive and I feel like I always remember it was always like Yokohama was one.
Still
Yeah, I'm
is
watching.
still
Yeah,
a big
yeah,
one of the big ones, isn't it?
and just
Yeah.
watching the brownies just off the front, just out of the bike, just and shouting at people and then sprinting out of transition and so yeah, pretty cool to
Yeah.
have a chat and hopefully a good listen as well for everyone.
Yeah. And definitely go and listen to it. We won't give any more spoilers away for the episode. So It was just a really good chat. One thing I want to quickly mention before we go into that was I off the back of last week's episode where we were talking about the super shoes with Justin. My Pumas arrived the next day. My Puma Fast R3s, which you mentioned. I was like, right, that's it. Let's get in the lab, test them out, and I did a nice little. What did I do? I did 6 times 5 minutes, 19k an hour, rotating between 3 shoes, so 2 trials in each. One being the Puma Fast R3s, which have been talked about loads in that. There's been a lot of hype around them, and there was a nice paper. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, there was a nice paper which came out describing them as, I can't remember, it was about 5% better, wasn't it, than a standard shoe, and significantly better than the Alpha Fly, was it?
I don't know if they had a control in the shoe.
No, I think you're right.
It was just a super shoe versus super shoe, wasn't
it? Yeah, and it came out the best. Well, anyway, I had the Puma Faster 3s, my Metaspeed Sky Parises by Asics, which are what I raced in Valencia in, and then I had a control shoe, which was the Saucony Fast Twitch, which was like one of the last like flats they released before super shoes came around, basically. So it was a really nice shoe, and this is like not one that I've dug out from back in the day. This is not had too much miles on it. I bought it a year or two ago and just use it for stride and stuff. So all shoes in pretty good nick. Yeah, 2 trials each, 5 minutes and 19k an hour. Jesus, I don't know how we used to race in those flats. Did you ever have a pair of just like you wouldn't?
Yeah, I had a pair of like the last pair of Takumi Sens before they went really big.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, we talked a bit about it with Alistair, but it was like night and day. Like I did the first trial in the Pumas, felt, oh god, these are bouncy, these are springy. Then did 5 minutes in the Parises, and I know what these feel like. They're good. I believe in these. Put on the fast twitches and these old school flats, and I didn't need the metabolic cart on to tell me that this was harder. This was especially when you're at those speeds, and like if you're jogging, then you can't really notice that. You're not going to notice that much in terms of your perception of effort, whether something's easier or harder. But when you're pretty close to your threshold, I felt like, oh yeah, I've gone from below threshold here to be like redlining it. I'm at threshold now. This is hard. But anyway, the numbers which I thought I'd share with you were quite interesting. So control shoe I'm using as like the comparison. So the Sky Parises, oxygen consumption was 4.6% lower, which is like pretty massive, isn't it? Like everyone talks about Nike 4% more economical. Well, I was 4.6% more economical in the Metaspeed Sky Parises. Pumas minus 5.1%, so 5.1% oxygen, less oxygen used at 19k an hour versus the control shoe. And pretty consistent between the 2 trials as well. Like there wasn't much of a deviation there, which was nice to see. Like good reliability between the trials. And you know what? I was a bit disappointed. I thought there'd be more for the Pumas, like 0.5%. Like on last week's episode, we were sort of saying how actually you're probably getting about 2/3 of the improvement, aren't you? If you get 4% more economical, you're probably 3% ish faster. So if you're talking about 0.5% more economical, then maybe you're 0.3% faster, which obviously is going to add up over a marathon. But it wasn't like the game changer, like shift in evolution that I maybe didn't necessarily expect, but I thought it could be a possibility. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you said to me about just the feel. Was it in the heel? Was a bit
because it's not got much of a heel. It's not got much of a heel, and I'm a heel striker. Like so that's where I make my first point of contact. And I did feel this is odd. I don't know how I'd feel after running 42k in it. Like anecdotally, I've heard of people like I've had people run great in it, and like one of the athletes I coached ran it in London and had a massive PB. And other people I have had some like reported some like soft tissue, like muscle aches, pains, which have obviously if it's not comfortable for you and you can't run in it for 42k, it doesn't matter about that 0.5% more economical. Right. So it's one to go test out. on the road. Like on bad, like, off of just those economy data, yeah, I'm wearing it for Valencia, but it's not as simple as that. I need to go test it out with some longer distances. But I thought I'd just share that with you before we jumped into this episode.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to because we spoke quite a bit about testing shoes with Dustin, didn't we? So good to good to cover it again. Just before the interview of Alistair, as always, we're sponsored by Saw. Thanks again as always, Saw, for sponsoring the podcast. I had two bits of Saw gear on last week, and I came second in a race. So draw the conclusions you want from that. I think no, it was nice hot evening for a trail race. So I was really appreciative of the Saw gear, and then my partner Rachel had a couple of bits on as well, and I think also felt nice and cool in hot conditions that we're having in the UK at the moment. So definitely worth checking out Saw. Comfy gear, and it looks good. I think
I had a few people message me saying, made advantage of the summer solstice challenge, got their £75 off, and have invested. It does definitely make a difference. Like, I've got a pair of Nike shorts, right? Not to call out like the GB kit, but like these are shorts I got from running one of the 50Ks I did a few years ago when I was in the GB team, and they just hold moisture. Like, I take them off and they're saturated, and these were like, these are not cheap shorts. They're like, at the time, Nike's best stuff. And it's just night and day between that and the Saw stuff.
Yeah.
I could wring them out, these Nike shorts. I sweat loads, if that's probably too much information, but I'm a massive sweater. And it's just gross. If any of these starts chafing and this and that, get some nice kit, especially when it's hot. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, and you look good as well. But thank you as always, Saw. I think we'll just jump into the interview now, right?
Enjoy it. Let us know what you think, and hopefully the first of many Olympic champions will get my podcast. What do you reckon?
Yeah, first of many. Yeah. Cool. Enjoy listening, everyone. So we're really excited today to be joined by Alistair Brownlee. I don't think he needs much of an introduction, but he's a two-time Olympic gold medalist in triathlon in the London 2012 Olympics and Rio 2016. We could list loads of other PBs. One that I thought was interesting was you're one of two people to complete the Grand Slam of Olympic, World and Continental Championships, which I think is quite a nice collection. I think at quite a rare club. Cassandra Bogrand's the other athlete that joins you in that sort of rare club. But how is it going, Alistair?
It's really good, thank you. Lovely to speak to you both. I love talking about sport and I love talking about science, physiology. So it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I mean, it's not on our list, but in doing some research, I heard you mention a couple of times that you turned down going to Cambridge to do a doctoral, a degree in medicine. It's the right word I'm looking for. But I think, did you do a degree in sports science?
Kind of right. I actually started studying medicine. I did a few months of it in Cambridge and then moved back to Leeds to focus on my triathlon and did a degree then in sports science and physiology. So I'd say exercise physiology was always my kind of biggest interest actually in kind of the academics. My dad had bought me the physiology of exercise, like a textbook as about a 14-year-old or something. And so that was my kind of early introduction to exercise physiology. Obviously, I was interested in training and interested in the human body, which ultimately kind of led me to want to do medicine, I think.
You did the right choice to be MO, Alistair. My wife's a GP. It's not fun. Being a pro triathlete probably beats it.
As it turns out, it turned out right. But at the time, the decision was a tough one. Let's just leave it there.
Yeah, I can imagine. If we go right, we'll dive into what your training looked like when you were, I guess, in your top, at your peak, and you were training for like the short course. What would like a big training week look like? Like how many hours and how much that was running?
Yeah, I mean, training was a lot really, and I had a kind of the base of my philosophy was accumulating as much load, which was done by accumulating consistent hours over weeks, months, and years, effectively. And so my training was all about kind of I guess, innovating to see how much training I could fit into a week. And I did that in a couple of ways. One of the ways was making sure that my low intensity was really low intensity. And I kind of came across that belief quite early, and it really stayed with me throughout my career, and probably became even more so as I got older. Actually, I had to become even more strict about it. But yeah, a normal training week would be somewhere between 6 and 7.5 hours of swimming, somewhere 15 plus 18, 20 hours of cycling in big weeks, depending on what I was doing, and between 8 and 12 hours of running when I was really running. In the kind of in my mid-20s, when I was really trying to get the most out of myself running wise, I was running a lot. I'd double run probably 3 or 4 times a week on top of everything else. As well as actually, should say, a couple of gym sessions and massage and physio and everything on the side.
Eating and training, basically.
Yeah, very much so. It was a 24/7 job, going out. And I remember weeks and months at a time where I was like, I haven't really done anything here. I've not been out to see friends or anything. I've just trained hard, slept in my altitude tent, and got a lot fitter.
Yeah. What was your split between like intensity and like the easy stuff? Like how many intense sessions were you doing a week across the 3 disciplines?
Well, in terms of like session wise, the statistical split would be probably 1 to 3, so 25% intense. But in terms, if you look at it, volume time, the split was tiny. I mean, I haven't looked at it back, going all the way back, and that was in the days before we were recording an awful lot. But I reckon it could have been under 5% purely intense stuff. And I didn't do, or I did very, very little apart from intensity that was kind of top end of intensity scale, VO2 max or above, really.
I guess 5% of 30 hours a week of training is still quite a bit of intensity.
Still a lot,
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you going about, you said about controlling intensity on your easy days and not going flat out on your hard days. How are you judging that intensity? You're just looking at paces or using other variables there?
Well, yeah, I mean, to start with, I tried all sorts. And actually, when I was really young, at probably 15, 16, I was already experimenting, looking at heart rate and pacing off that front. And I ended up just pacing it completely off feel, actually. I did a lot of my training with other people. I'd shout at them if they're going too hard up a hill and get them to slow down. I was really quite obsessive about it. In the pool, all my pacing was done off time. If I was running on the track, but I was only ever running quick, it was really specific time pace based intensity prescription, as it were. But the rest of the time, not so much. Later in my career, when I was using power a lot more on the bike, especially, and I really realized I had to control my intensity more than anything to allow recovery and allow my body to do the hard sessions. I did use power a lot as a intensity kind of prescription tool, but in the early days, not a lot. I did it very much off feel.
Did that change in using power a bit more sort of coincide with your sort of move to the longer course events as well?
Yeah, it definitely did. A combination of the timing and power meters becoming much more prevalent, and becoming moving to the long course racing. I mean, the reason for that is pretty obvious. In short course racing, you're trying to go as hard as you can at the right times and tactically to work and race, when you use the word race, because you are actually racing the people around you. In long course, it's a much more individual time trial style effort, which you are basing on your kind of internal physiological parameters, really. And so being able to know that the power to use it as a pacing tool and using power as a training tool and trying to get efficient at kind of those particular kind of thresholds, as it were, was really important. But in short distance racing, there isn't that kind of important.
Yeah, I think one of the things you said just before that, which was interesting, was just going off of actually just feel got you to the right place, and you figured out what intensities you could run at and swim and cycle at to sustain the volume of training you were doing. And I see that with the triathletes I work with. I see that all the time. I'm not having to tell the triathletes to slow down, because if they were going too hard, they're not going to be able to do the training volume that they're getting given. Running is like the opposite, and that I'm always telling people to slow down, because if you're only doing 8, 9, 10 hours of training, maybe a bit more, depending on what level you're at and what stage of your career, you can go too hard quite easily and not making any progress. But I like the idea of like natural selection gets you to where you that evolution of training ends up at just finding something that's sustainable.
Yeah, and the kind of concept of my body adapts to load, to stimulus, and it adapts to that, and I get fitter, faster, stronger. Obviously various things at the physiological level. That was quite an early kind of approach for me probably as a 16-year-old, and I'm going out and training when I'm at school, and so I kind of work back from that, and I'm like, well, if this is a load thing, how do you accumulate the most number of loads you can? I mean, and it comes down to the science of it, that if the restricting factor ultimately is your stroke volume, it makes sense that literally accumulating the most number of heartbeats at that stroke volume, at the ejection, your left ventricular ejection volume, you're probably going to get the biggest adaptation, right? Then it's a really simple concept, but so it's like, well, how do you do that? You do that by doing as much consistency as you can, being really consistent. You do that by doing what you can at a really low intensity, as much as you can, and you accumulate that over time. And I did it also, I kind of realized, I think probably by trial and error, that I kind of knew the basics of the physiology in terms of like, the threshold model, and like things obviously change after that first threshold. And through trial and error of going out and training and going hard for a long period of time, I know that if I was really pushing close to that first threshold, it was way more fatiguing, both physiologically and neuromuscular and mentally, than it was being 20 watts or 20 seconds a K below that threshold. And I think the jury's out. I mean, the in terms of the bang for your buck, I mean, maybe it's not 1 for 1 in terms of 1 minute for 1 unit of adaptation at both of those intensities, but if you can accumulate twice as many hours slightly easier, and you can afford to do it, and I think that equation is probably much closer than people think. I think the bang for your buck you get at that higher end of your aerobic, say, zone is probably much closer to what you get at a lower than most people think, and you can accumulate way more work. I mean, I don't even think that number is twice. I think it can be significantly more, because you're not causing that. You're not got the neuromuscular and the kind of psychological stress. You're not starting to draw significantly, I think, on your kind of glycogen stores. You've not got that metabolic stress of having to burn through your muscle glycogen stores. And so, I'm kind of like reverse engineering here, as you can probably tell. But then there's lots of reasons why that kind of training philosophy makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great message, and it's something like I share over time. Like talking about easy days, people go, "Oh, could I go like 20 seconds a K faster?" And you probably could, and your lactate would be fine. But how much more benefit are you going to get? Probably very little. But you're going to get more tired. You're going to get more, glycogen depleted, and you just risk like crossing that threshold and it becoming too hard, and then comes your high intensity day, and you can't do it, or you have to cut it short, and that's going to have a much bigger impact than did you run at like 4:30 a K or 4 minutes per K on your easy day.
And the other thing definitely with running, which is why cycling is kind of more of a physiological challenge in some ways, because running, you have this thing where it's not a linear pace to injury risk, mechanical load relationship, is it? It's I don't know what it is, but it's probably exponential in some exponent. And that difference to your example of running between 4:30 and 4:10 isn't taking out 10%, isn't increasing injury risk by 10%. I don't know. I would imagine it's, maybe not double 10%, but it is a lot more than 10%. So, and then if you increase it a bit more, it goes up even more. So, especially in running, like accumulating the load with the lowest injury risk as well is obviously what you want to
do. No, definitely. When you're talking about training load there and accumulating a really high volume of loads, was this something you were actually quantifying, or were you just sort of quantifying that in terms of hours, or using like some of these like TRIMP scores or TSS or anything like that, or was it just a bit more theoretical, I guess?
I tried everything, from the earliest days of doing it just recording it in diaries and times, and recording like basically easy, medium, and high intensity, and weighting that. And then more recently, obviously, recording it in platforms and looking at TS and Trimp. I mean, I don't think there's any perfect way to do it, to be honest. I don't actually think any of those are necessarily better than any of the others. They're all limited by our understanding, our mathematical understanding of what the scores are telling us, and then analysing that and deciding what to do with them. And kind of my kind of rule of data is that if you collect something today and ultimately it doesn't impact what you do tomorrow, there's not an awful lot of point collecting something today. But that said, I think it's an area I'm really interested in, the whole using physiological data to somehow quantify load effectively, because kind of obviously that's like the base variable to create. I think if we think of for me, the two physiological constructs that are pretty solid in terms of like endurance training, one is the more load you do, the better you get. And let's like ignore slightly at the moment like the balances of different intensities in that's important. And the second is if you progress that load over time with periods of down, you progressive overload, you're going to get better as well. And so if you take those two principles, having a really good way of measuring load is really important. And I don't think we've got one yet.
No, I agree. It's definitely a topic we've discussed about doing on another episode, like different ways of quantifying load and the many flaws, like you've said, that there are with each of them, because there's none perfect, no ones that are perfect. In terms of like setting the limit then to how much you were doing, how would that come about? You talked about progressive overload. I guess you can't just keep adding an hour every week, because you're soon going to end up with something that's completely unsustainable. How would you judge setting that limit? Is it just how am I feeling today? Like how am I feeling over the last 4 weeks? Like how would you set that? I guess
it was trial and error, and so I had a really set week. Monday I'm doing ABC, Tuesday I'm doing 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. So my week was set, and then over a period of time, I'd just go, I'm going to add 10 minutes onto that run and see what happens, and another 10 minutes onto this run here and see what happens. Do I feel all right the next day? What happens the week after? Kind of deal with it. And so over a period of time, I just added bits on, and at times I'd either got a bit too tired, or I'd done a bit too much, or I'd done a bit too much over a long period of time, or I got injured, and then I stopped and started again. But it's very much trial and error. And I think it's just an approach of, it sounds again so simple, but it is like innovation in its own way by really small iteration. And I'm a firm believer in that. I think what I've seen in sport and other things now, that quite often it's those small innovations, along the way that add up and aggregate to something really big, that are more important. So the answer to your question is trial and error.
No, systematically though, which is important, isn't it? Like just gradually increasing it and looking at the response.
Well, basically making sure you didn't get a negative response.
I mean, I think it sounds like you sort of, I guess, through their trial and error, found your way to a program and a way of training that worked. But I guess especially as you sort of progressed in like the English system, like did you have any input? Was there a grown input from sports science and sports scientists into your training? Through your career?
There was, and obviously with the kind of the systems and the training programs with the federations, I mean that's one of the great things. You do have input. You have access to kind of sports scientists and physiologists and everything else. And so, I did have input from all kinds of people over the years, actually, from people from within the programs and outside programs. And I did, over the years also try and seek out kind of expert knowledge. So, I'd try and get in contact with the best physiologist I could find. So I speak to a guy called Michael Joyner quite a lot, for example, and I'd find the expert on heat and send them an email and try and talk to them a little bit. So I was doing that as well to try and make myself kind of the expert. yeah, did have some input. I had input from lots of sources, and I just kind of I knew I didn't have the answers, but I also kind of thought it was important that I made the decisions, and I'd have information from every possible source I maybe could, and trying to make the decision off it. And I also I was a bit worried. It's in the era of everyone was talking of marginal gains coming from cycling, and maybe it's not so fashionable anymore, but it's a great concept, right? You aggregate lots of the small 0.1 percenters and they add up to something big. It's kind of something that I guess I said a few answers ago. But I was also aware that I was a triathlete doing it mostly on my own back with much less resource and support that some other big sports. There's not a problem with that. It's just the way it was. And it was very much for me the big gains, the big stones as they were, was the training volume. So everything for me was about removing the barriers to how much training volume I could do. And then around that, of course, optimizing recovery, nutrition, sleep, equipment, all those kind of things. But I really tried to make sure I didn't keep my eye off the ball, of which was the main thing.
Did you do regular lab testing or field-based testing with a physiologist?
Didn't do hardly any lab testing, actually. I did a bit when at the very start of my career, and I realised it didn't really tell me anything, and then I stopped and did hardly any until the last kind of 5 or 6 years of my career, when I was really starting to investigate nutrition specifically, and did quite a few cool stuff, looking at like metabolism studies and trainers for running economy stuff and various bits and pieces. But yeah, although I didn't do any of that, I had really set kind of training sets that would show me exactly where I was. So like I'd know, and I'd jump in a pool, and if someone said swim this time for 400 meters, and without looking at a clock, I could do it, and I'd know how that should feel, and so I was really, really kind of clamped down on some specific training sets.
I think you were mentioning fueling there. I think that's a good sort of segue onto our sort of a big topic we wanted to ask you about. I guess maybe your career, can we say, has spanned a sort of fueling revolution. And George, my first question, I was just really curious. What were you fueling with? When you started at London 2012, like what was in your bottle compared to at the end of your career?
Yeah, well, even before that, I was actually writing a timeline of my nutrition beliefs today, and it's quite funny because, you start off as going to athletics meets and swimming galas and thinking that you just need to eat a bit of jelly and eat a banana maybe, to never ever eating during training and only stopping for a cafe stop, to Beijing, where I'd probably just have whatever almost. At the Olympics in Beijing, whatever energy drink I could get my hand on, wasn't really thinking about how much carbs or salt in it. By the time London comes around in 2012, I've got a pretty dialed approach to Olympic distance racing, where I'm probably, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'm carb loading in the 2 days beforehand. I'm like salt loading in the 2 days beforehand. I am taking on 1.5 liters of water with probably 60 to 80 grams of carbs in it. I tried almost every nutrition intervention at the time there, whether it was sodium loading or using nitrates. And so, that was, and then into Rio, it was quite similar. In Rio, I actually had a custom carb mix that I mixed in with black Yorkshire tea, because I thought that settled my stomach and would allow me to ingest more at the time. And then, post Rio is like then moving into long distance, when obviously nutrition gets more important, and we see it as you have rightly said, we see this change from people thinking you can get away with very little, or kind of 60 grams of carbs now are right up to 120 grams and more. I did kind of lab based the metabolic testing to see what I could do, and combining that with experimenting with different carb combinations and salt and stuff to try and get the best fuel. But it's been a massive change, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess it goes back to your other point of trying to accumulate as much training load as you can. You can only do that if you're fueling a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is
I missed that completely, actually. I mean, you're right. I learned somewhere along there that you could accumulate more load by fueling appropriately. And really, and I got more and more keen, probably a bit on periodizing that fueling, which I think, there's times actually early in my, I did loads of it probably throughout my whole career without really thinking about it. I would swim every morning without ever eating anything or taking any nutrition with me. So there's an hour and a half of like exercise. Some would say like fasted or not fueled. For me, it was just not eating before swimming. But yeah, I got more focused on that later on. Thinking of doing longer rides that were really aerobic without taking carbs. But when I was doing anything that was tough, threshold plus sessions, really, really focusing in on kind of race style nutrition there to get my body used to trained, get the gut trained, the transporters ready to absorb as much carbs as possible.
And I guess as you move to long course, that was even more dialed in terms of that's such a big part of it, fueling for sitting on the bike for so long and being able to run, a long way off of that as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It becomes whatever those percentages are. In a sprint distance, it's like 5% of the performance matrix, if that, and Olympic distance is a bit more. By the time you get to Ironman, it's like 75%. If you get it wrong, you've got very much no chance of getting around. So, yeah, it became really important. And yeah, I had a kind of completely dialed approach, which was about trying to deliver 120 grams of carbs, a 1-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio, different amounts of salt depending on the conditions, up to 3 grams or even more an hour if it was hot, because I knew I had a high sodium concentration in my sweat, and up to about 2.5 liters of water per hour, especially on the bike. And yeah, I found fueling it effectively in Ironman and half Ironman distance, when you got it right, it was incredible. The amount of work you can do for the amount of time is really amazing. But also really simplifying the nutrition, and by that I mean two things: stripping back everything in my nutrition that I thought didn't need to be there, so flavorings and preservatives and everything, just making it basically a mixture of the sugar and the salt and as little else as we possibly could, and simplifying it in terms of how I was taking it. So not having loads of gel packets, not sure what to take when. I just had everything I needed in the bike. If it's for a 4-hour Ironman, in one bottle, and I knew that a drink was about 50 ml, and so I just needed that about every 10 to 15 minutes, and that would be my intake. Really simple when there's so many other things going on in racing. You don't need to make nutrition more complicated, and yeah, that's basically the philosophy behind True Fuels, which is the nutrition business I'm working on now. Simplify nutrition, and because I think and you guys probably know better than me, the majority of people, for if it's whether it's an Ironman or a marathon or an ultra marathon or whatever it might be, who don't perform to the level that they should perform at, the majority of them, it's probably a nutrition mistake, and it's actually not whether they're taking 80 or 90 grams or whether they're taking 1 or 2 grams of salt, or it's just it's way off. It's because they're taking something they've never tried before, or it's because they're trying to take 140 grams and it's too much, or it's because they've taken no salt and they need salt because it's a hot day. And so actually I think just the simplicity and educating people just to have the right amount of nutrition kind of in the generally central, the central kind of sensible guidelines, I think is what I'm trying to achieve with that, and I think that's about the best approach.
Yeah. No, I think one of the ways in which I think sports science and sports nutrition has a massive impact is in that fueling part of the equation, and yeah, definitely is a really big impact on performance, especially as you start talking about the longer events. And we all know people who've run a great half marathon and they try and run a marathon and they don't convert very well at all. And nutrition is definitely a big part of that. And I still think there's a lot of either misinformation or just a lack of education out there on actually which is the best fuel type for you. What should you be using? You want something with a mix of different types of carbs, not just glucose. Like the amount of people who I've spoken to who said, "Oh yeah, just not getting on with the fueling. I'm trying to do really high intake," and they're using like SIS Go gels, which have got like 20 grams of just glucose in there, and that's what they're trying to use. Like £6 from Aldi or something like that. And you're like, that's not going to cut it. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your latest venture then, True Fuels, and how you're trying to make a difference there?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you. So I think that the main kind of principles behind it is what I already talked about. That kind of firstly educating the user, and secondly simplifying the process. And the simplification, I mean, in terms of the ingredients, so there's no irritants in there, and in terms of people being able to take it, and simplifying the process. So that's why the first product is a 40-gram gel, or 1-to-1 fructose to maltodextrin ratio, which I found worked really well, and the literature backs up as being in the window. If I'm not entirely sure what that window is, but being in the window work best. The difference we have is that we have 2 salt versions, which is a 1 gram in the 40 gram and a 0.25 grams of salt in the 40 grams. And the idea is that they're stackable, and you can combine them differently depending on generally how much salt you need. And if people say, "Oh, I need a salt test, a sweat test to work that out," I said, "Well, you can do that, but I'm actually not convinced you do. If you know you're a salty sweater, or if you haven't been anywhere warm and you're about to do a warm event in warm conditions, the way I see it is there's very few disadvantages from taking significant salt in that event. Don't chronically every day taking loads of salt, but if you're doing something hot as a relative one-off, take plenty of salt, because the risks of underdoing it, we've all experienced. Even though I know plenty of sports scientists are not necessarily in agreement in terms of salt as a driver of many things, including cramp. My anecdotal experience here, I'm sorry, absolutely weighs through that, and I know that it does. So those 2 different products for people to mix and match depending on what they're doing. Really simple. That the only other thing in there, obviously a bit of potassium and magnesium, and most of the potassium comes from coconut water as kind of a natural, simple source, and gives us a bit of flavour. And we've got a few other exciting products coming out after that. An electrolyte one, something that's specifically designed actually around people perform to their best in warm conditions. Recovery is exciting. I've enjoyed working on product development and trying to work out what people actually need, and making products that hopefully help people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think someone who's done Ironman triathlons there, but that's a perfect knowledge base to start from, I think, because as you said, if you don't get that fueling right, you're not going to get through the event. So your website's live now, right? You can go and look it up. Is it available in stores as well, or is it just online at the minute?
Truefuels.com. Yeah, it's mostly online and will be available in stores soon. Yeah,
nice.
Just signed up a distributor. So
yeah, nice. They're quite attractive looking. Got to say, I've got my website up here. Nice white and pink stripe there.
I agree.
Was that your design, Alistair?
Yeah, I can't claim any. I can't claim any of the branding. I am the least artistic, creative person you will ever meet. So that is definitely not my my area.
It's not my strength either. I leave that to the professionals. Nice. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but how have you seen the sport evolve? Even from like 2016 to now, when we're looking at the likes of like Hayden Wild and Alex Yee, there definitely seems to be an evolution in over that time. What would you say the big differences are between, I guess, the time when you were concentrating on the Olympic distance and the Olympics in Paris, for example?
I think all sports evolve, don't they? And they evolve on a load of different axes. We see like training change, the talent that come into it change, technology change as well. And so, I mean, definitely we've seen an increase on all three of those, I'd say. How's that manifested. And the other thing I'd say is like a kind of tactical kind of tactical evolution, and triathlon, that's quite interesting because it doesn't depend on one or two people. It depends on an evolution of a bunch of people. You see eras where it's a bit more swim bike focused in the men or the women, and then you see eras where it's a bit more only run focused, and so I think on all those axes you see kind of evolution and change, and progress, and yeah, that's manifested in different ways, in sometimes faster racing, sometimes slower, more tactical racing with a faster run. And yeah, Paris was a unique event because of the swim current made it quite interesting, kind of neutralized the swim in lots of ways, and then came down to that really quick run in the heat. So yeah, I think we probably on the whole see faster racing from gun to tape, and I think on the whole we probably see faster running in the men's race than we saw in my era.
How go on, Owain?
I was going to say, did you ever factor in sort of, I guess, the sort of the state of triathlon at the time into your training? So did you think, because I like one of my recollections of your racing is, a group of you coming out on the bike and just at least from my perspective watching on TV, just working your asses off to get out to keep your lead and stay out on the run. And I feel like it was always a small group of you, like working hard. Would that impact your training? Like if the tactics had been different, would you have tailored your training slightly, or will you just be the best me and I'll figure it out on the day?
My philosophy was I was trying to be the best me, and I was also I was training for one Olympic Games, which was London. I had a once in a lifetime a chance to win a home Olympic Games. I'd known about that race for a long time, and I was like, well, how do I do that? It's a probability game. I've got to maximise the chances of doing it, and I maximise the chances by firstly working to my strengths, and in a very simple statistical way by minimising and cutting down the field. And so, yeah, that's how I looked at it. I was like, yeah, I need to change that. The chances of me winning that race from 1 in 2, I only win every second race, to I need to stand on that start line and think there's a 19 in 20 chance I'm going to win this race today.
So with that in mind, Ben, will there be people who you didn't want there on the run? You'd like to get rid of them on the bike and then hopefully have a bit of gap going into the run? Because obviously you were a fantastic runner. Like that was one of your strengths. But I guess, how are your tactics playing in the race, but also in the training? If you think, actually, I need my bike to be a little bit better so I can drop this guy, for example.
Definitely. In the kind of London area, to be honest, the best runner was also Javier Gomez, who was always going to be there anyway. And so, to an extent, it was how can I slim down the field and just increase the chances. And I thought I could expose them a bit on the bike in a small group. So I was thinking that. So, I was training to be an all-round kind of triathlete. There were other times when I was like, no, I need to really focus hard on my run. But to be honest, when you got it right in triathlon, you were pretty much the best you could be at all three. If you got it right and you maximized across the three sports. And those times when, for sure, I was a better biker and I'd race accordingly to that. It's probably actually, your question is more the other way around. Sometimes I went into races and thought, I've got like a 1% chance of winning this today, and the only chance I've got winning this is to get away and have a gap by the end of the bike, because I'm not going to compete against this person on the run. So that's how I'm going to race. And those are some examples of that, like a race in Stockholm when I did that once. And for the Olympics in Rio, there was a couple of people who I thought, it's going to be close if I run in a one-on-one run against them. I don't want to do that. And so I had this kind of crazy plan to train for it with the other guys that I was training with, and then race like that, where we just got out of the swim. And it was my strategy with Johnny to say, look, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing here. We're committing 100% to the first 10 minutes of this bike to try and force a split. And it thankfully worked out.
And I guess just thinking about Paris as well, like that sort of plan maybe wouldn't have worked because the course was just so tight and twisty, and I guess you would have been doing a different sort of cycling effort, right? You would have been just sprinting out of every corner to do a similar sort of, I guess, approach. But yeah, it is really interesting
It
how
could
the
potentially
course
work.
changes.
No, I think it could work. It would you'd have to. You couldn't do it on your own, and so you'd need a few other people to do it with you. Is one thing, and it could work. You can still make it really hard on actually relatively flat, especially cornery courses. You just have to know what you're doing a little bit. I think probably one of the dynamics has changed is that they know there's always going to be a really committed chase from some of the people coming behind. So, someone like Christian Blumenfeld and a few of those others that a couple of the other Norwegians, a couple of others, they know that there's going to be a committed chase from them, whatever. So, you're going to work really hard, and you might end up with a 30-second gap. That said, I mean, I've got no doubt. I don't know who's going to do it and when it's going to happen, but I've got no doubt there will be an era where, again, there's a really good swim biker, and that kind of the tactical kind of aspect of it changes a bit again.
Yeah, because we're definitely in a run era at the minute in the men's side, aren't we? With Alex and Hayden. It's really exciting to watch. Like that Paris, the run of Paris was like super exciting. Like highlight the games.
Last lap.
Yeah, so good. I mean, speaking of Alex and Hayden, like they've both gone and done some more like running events. Like obviously Alex went and did London Marathon, and Hayden ran that great 10K before unfortunately coming off on his bike, didn't he? I mean, was there anything that any period you thought I'd like to try a bit more individual racing? I know earlier on in your career you did a bit of that, like you went to Eurocross and for GB, and you did that Peyton Jordan 10,000 on the track where you ran 28:32, which in 2013, I mean, it's still an exceptional time, but like pre-super shoes, like that's even more an exceptional time.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess go on, sorry.
That's the important thing, isn't it? Pre-super shoes. There's easily another minute there. That was actually about then. That was my attempt to do a bit of running, and I think it was really good doing other stuff, and I did little bits of other stuff over the years as well, like cross country and a bit of bike racing and stuff. But I realised it was impossible to do anything. To do everything. I think your question of do I wish I'd done more of it? I don't know if I wish I'd done more running. I think there's like the injury risk there. What I do, maybe looking back with hindsight, is the thing that I would have done differently is to actively give myself really blocks of time out. Train really, really hard, really focused, but to probably be a bit more serious about having a 6 to 8 month block of time out post some of those Olympic Games, and actually probably not do running racing in that. Maybe if I wanted to do some bike racing or other stuff, stay active. But yeah, that's maybe the one thing I'd look back and change. But it's hard to change. Hindsight is a great thing, and you don't want to tempt fate either. So I'm not saying I would do that differently. I'm just saying, that's a perspective.
Yeah. I think one of the things that comes up with runners is this idea of cross training. Like, how much do you think your bike and swim training helped your run training? And to put that another way, like, do you think you'd have been a faster runner if you just ran and you could do a little bit more? In this idea of how much of that training load is crossing over, like those adaptations you get from the swim and bike, how much of that is helping you run?
I think a lot of it crosses over, but I think it's a curve, and for triathlon training, you probably just go a little bit over the top of the curve there. And so, if I wanted to be the best runner I possibly could have, I think doing a lot of that training, maybe not like 20 plus hours a week of the other stuff, would have been ideal. And probably quite a lot less swimming, because you don't want to kind of have that upper body strength. But I think I could have. I do think it's important. I mean, we started off talking about, if you think of the kind of model of the aerobic engine, getting that aerobic, that aerobic volume in is important. And you can do a lot of that by running slowly, and you see some incredible volumes that runners reach these days. And I think shoes have had a big impact on that. I think as much as the the actual times on the race day. I think people's training, I think maybe an even bigger impact. But yeah, I still don't think you can accumulate all your maximum, let's say your maximum effective volume running. I think I'd probably always want to do some cross training.
Yeah. And if you hadn't been able to run for an injury or whatever, how much difference would you feel when you were racing a triathlon? I guess you've talked about it a little bit earlier, like you would probably try and make it a bit more bike focused and really make that a hard, so the run wasn't going to be quite as intense. But would you see big drop offs in your run fitness?
Yeah, way off, especially like at that Olympic distance 5-10K, because you're still trying to run quite fast. I was basically, to win at that level, I knew I had to be in close or under 30-minute 10K off the bike shape, and I don't think you're ever running that fast. You're never running that fast by not running. You can be very fit, but you're not running that fast. I think actually over long distances, because the running is much slower, like less neuromuscular, just much more probably aerobic kind of, grunt strength, you probably get away with it more, but over the short distance, no.
And you mentioned a minute ago the super shoes, and what are your sort of thoughts on the equipment changes? Again, you saw some of it coming through your career, but the super shoes, but then also even things like the bikes and the wetsuits as well. Like, how do you sort of view those changes through your career?
I just think innovation, whether it's technological or not, is just fascinating. You use the example of wetsuits. I'm not sure actually how much they've innovated over the last 10, 15 years. I think that's one example. I think bikes are an interesting example because there's so many different components, and all those components have innovated a little bit, and those have added up to big innovations over all that time. And then there's this fantastic, I think I love the example of the shoes, talking about innovation to people, especially outside of sport, because, prior to that, when Super Shoes, the first one came in 2018, 2017, 2018, or even a bit earlier, there really hadn't been almost zero innovation in running trainers out there in probably 30 years, EVA soles really, and that'd been about it. And then all of a sudden there's this really interesting step change where there's just this massive change. And so, yeah, I think that's a fantastic, like a really interesting example. So, yeah, I mean, all these things have obviously added up to make athletes go faster. And nutrition's one as well that we already talked about.
It was I was gonna say, it's like going back and watching London and Rio, and just seeing the shoes that you're putting on. Just like there's nothing there. It's just the thinnest little slab of EVA.
Incredible, isn't it? Like, we went around for decades thinking that you just wanted to be in the lightest shoe you possibly could, and now we've gone the other way. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's like running in plimsolls. Like, I just I just remember running half marathons and not being able to walk for a week. Like, 1 centimeter of foam. Just now, like, yeah, you saw the next day, but not the same.
It's completely different. Yeah, and I think that's why the point about training, I think it's allowed real innovation and changes in training as much as anything.
Yeah, I guess there's obviously the evolution on the whole as a sport, but I get at that top end, like the Olympics, it is a bit of an arms race as well. When you think about like bike technology and what goes on track cycling, that seems to be a huge part of it. Did you have a good support team around you? I know you've got some great sponsors over your career. Did you have any role there in like testing out gear and kit, whether it be shoes or bikes or anything else?
Yeah, I tried to maximize my kit, kind of, as I said, like at the kind of most sensible possible level. I thought I did all this training. I wanted to make sure I had the best equipment, and tested that. I had fantastic sponsors and turned down sponsors because I thought the equipment wasn't as good, quite a lot. And yeah, when I started doing long distance more, I had a real focus on kind of my aerodynamics on the bike, for example, and using the best equipment then. So yeah, I looked into everything really.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally wanted to know this. I hope it's interesting to the listeners as well. But what was going through your mind, and what's it like to just run away at the front of the Olympic triathlon, like, and doing it twice as well? You know, if I'm leading a race, I'm panicking. I'm like, what's happening? Like, I'm not used to being here. But were you sort of like present in the moment? Did you know what was happening? Were you thinking like, I just want to destroy everyone else, or were you enjoying it? You know, what was going through your head in those moments?
Well, I must admit, in London, it all happened so quick, and it was pretty close. I remember hearing a coach say with like 2 kilometers to go, you've got 9 or 11 seconds or something. I'm thinking, well, that's pretty good. I'm not going to lose 5 seconds a K. And then I remember very like briefly and coming down the finish line, like seeing friends that I knew from school and my local running club and stuff shouting me on, but thinking, no, just get to the finish line, get to the finish, and not really giving myself a chance to take it in at all. Then I was lucky enough in Rio to have much kind of more time to be a bit present and think about it. And I thought I didn't get a chance to, take this in last time, and I'm probably never going to get a chance to do it again. So I'm going to give myself a bit more chance. But yeah, amazing. Like it is obviously a cliche, but in my case, it's very, very true. It's an absolute childhood dream.
Which one, if this is not an impossible question, meant more to you?
It's impossible.
Winning.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it both fantastic for different reasons? But yeah, London, home Olympics, and Rio, I've had all kinds of injuries and fighting back. So they're special in their own ways as well.
Yeah.
Are either of those sort of your, like, I guess, best ever race? Is there a race where you just think it was perfection, start to finish? Did you ever achieve that, or?
Yeah, I think I did have a few actually. London was very, very close. I'm very proud of that race. I think I was the, most complete triathlete I was ever at that point, across all three sports. And I probably had quite a lot more actually on the performance that I didn't even kind of go to in the end.
Do you wish that the relay had been a part of your career? Like that wasn't really that present, was it?
No.
That wasn't in Rio, right? There was no relay.
No. We did some relays, like racing in the French league, and we had some world champs and stuff, and obviously we had such a great collection of athletes in that era. It would have been a pretty much guaranteed medal, if not a gold medal. So yeah, of course, it'd be nice to have more Olympic medals, but no, I don't wish for any changes. Who knows what? That's tempting fate. Who knows what could have happened?
Yeah, no, definitely. Anything else, Owain? I think we had a great. We really appreciate you coming on, Alistair. First Olympic medalist on a podcast. Had some great researchers, but yeah, first Olympic medalist. So that's always very exciting. So we appreciate giving up your time. You got any final words you want to say? Give you True Fuel shout out again.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I think we talked plenty about True Fuels. That was fantastic, and just best of luck to you both, and look forward to listening to more of the podcast.
Cheers. Thanks very much.